Welcome everybody, and it's my real pleasure to introduce you to this session of the European Research and Innovation Days conference dedicated to transport and mobility, and more specifically within the context of the European Green Deal, how research and innovation into transport and mobility can contribute to a green recovery. My name is Patrick Child. I'm Deputy Director General in the European Commission's Directorate General for Research and Innovation. And I'm very much looking forward to moderating this discussion, which I'm sure is going to be very lively and interactive with our distinguished speakers. The European Green Deal is a top priority for President Ursula von der Leyen and for the whole of the present European Commission, with the very ambitious objective of making Europe the first fully carbon neutral continent by 2050. It sets a huge transformational agenda. And together with the digital transformation of our continent, the European Green Deal is also at the heart of the post-COVID recovery package, which was agreed by Europe's leaders in July of this year. Research and innovation is a vital component of our collective efforts to achieve progress towards the objectives of the European Green Deal. And that's why it's so important that Horizon Europe, our future research and innovation program, is at the heart of the new medium-term financial settlement, the budget for the European Union for the next 7 years. And in today's session, I hope we're going to be able to concentrate in particular on what we'll be able to achieve in Horizon Europe's cluster dedicated to energy, transport and climate to advance towards our objectives of the European Green Deal. And on top of that, I'd like just to remind us all that in parallel to this event today, there will be later this afternoon an information day on a specific Green Deal call, €1 billion of research and innovation funding that was agreed by the Commission last week and which is open now to give a kickstart to our work in this area. And finally, on transport and mobility, we know that transport sector alone accounts for 23% of greenhouse gas emissions in the European Union. And on current trends, the volume of greenhouse gas emissions from transport is going to double between now and 2050. And so what we need to focus on today is how, with research and innovation, in particular Horizon Europe, we can help to reverse that change and put the transport and mobility sector firmly within our Green Deal objective and contributing to Europe's recovery. So we're going to kick off our session with a keynote address from Professor Alan Mckinnon, who's Professor of Logistics at Kuhne Logistics University. As a former chair of the Transport Advisory Group of our Horizon 2020 research program, he's well placed to give us some authoritative leadership in this topic. And he's also been the lead author in the 5th assessment report of the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. After his, I'm sure, inspiring keynote remarks, we will have a high-level panel of speakers with, firstly, my colleague Harald Reuters, Director of Investment, Innovative and Sustainable Transport in DG Mobility and Transport in the European Commission. Then we'll have Grazia Vittadini, who has been in the news in the last couple of days surrounding Airbus's recent announcement on their commitment to hydrogen aircraft, but also in her role as Chief Technology Officer at Airbus. And then we've also got Thierry Auers, Vice President of the Chief Technology Office of the Volvo Group, who will complete our panel. We will encourage you to put questions to the panel from the chat, and we hope to have time to address those also in our session. But without further ado, I'd like to hand over straight away now to Professor Mckinnon. Alan, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Patrick. If I can have my presentation on the screen, please. Thank you very much. This is going to be a highly condensed presentation given the limited time, and I've built it around 4 themes. So my first theme is to do with urgency, to try to impress upon everyone in the transport research community how we must act quickly. We've changed the vocabulary in the past few years from climate change to climate emergency for very good reasons. Our carbon budget for the 1.5 degree temperature increase is rapidly depleting. According to some estimates, we only have about 8 years of emission of greenhouse gas at the current level to stay within that carbon budget. And 8 years, it seems to me, is about 2 or 3 research cycles. If you define a research cycle as spanning the process from the preparation of the call through the application process, the evaluation, the research, dissemination, clearly that research cycle is too long relative to the time we have to act on climate change. And so I think we have to time compress that process. I think we also have to move from a sort of sequential process where the recipients of the research results, the public policy and private sector decision makers, have to wait until the research is completed to get the results. So a new model of what I call parallel engagement, where they become an active part of the research process. And that will require emphasis then on things like action research and living labs. So I think we've got to rethink the way in which we do research to meet these very tight timescales. My second slide, please. My second theme relates to COVID. Clearly, the pandemic is going to have a huge impact on transport research in the area of sustainability. Rather perversely, one thing that the COVID crisis has shown us is the magnitude of the reduction in emissions that will be required to stay within our carbon reduction targets. Globally, I understand that at the depth of the confinement, when there was major industrial lockdown back in April and May, that reduced CO2 emissions from freight transport worldwide by about 30%. Now, that's quite coincidental because according to the International Transport Forum, the current policies for reducing CO2 emissions from freight transport, we're expecting a 30% reduction by 2030. So we achieved within a matter of months what was expected to happen over 15 years. Now, I'm not suggesting for a moment that we should be decarbonising in the way we've done it recently. That's clearly not sustainable. But what it has done is illustrate to us just the magnitude of the transformation that's going to be required to stay within these carbon targets. What the recent crisis has also done is reinforce and accelerate a whole series of socioeconomic trends which are having a big impact on the transport sector. Move to teleworking, for example, or the growth of online retailing. It seems to me that quite a few of these trends are actually going to be beneficial in environmental terms. One other thing, in the freight and logistics area, where most of my own research is concentrated, I think coming out of the COVID crisis, decision makers will be attaching much more importance to resilience in the way they manage their supply chains, moving to more localized sourcing, relaxing perhaps the just-in-time principle. And I think the good news here is that many of the things you do to improve resilience will also yield environmental sustainability benefits as well. But overall, I think transport researchers, in the light of the COVID crisis, will have to recalibrate their transport models. They'll have to revise some of the underpinning assumptions in those models to do with things like personal and industrial transport behavior and also logistical cost trade-offs, and clearly they'll have to recalibrate the future growth trends in the economy as well. So there's a big job, it seems to me, to be done by the academic research community to factor climate change, to factor pandemics, if you like, into our work on climate change. And moving rapidly to my third theme. Next slide, please. Thank you. I'm calling this one Unresolved Issues and Policy Dilemmas. Patrick mentioned in his introduction that for a couple of years I was the chair of the Transport Advisory Group of Horizon 2020. And I remember during that time I was asked a devil's advocate question. One of the EU officials said to me, surely all the major transport questions have been answered. Why do we need to continue pumping billions of euros into transport research? Now, of course, I very fervently disagreed with the premise in that question, and I would do so even more strenuously now, because it seems to me that there are lots of fundamental climate change-related questions yet to be answered in the transport area. In particular, for example, how we get the hard-to-abate sectors like heavy goods vehicles, ships and planes onto the right decarbonisation pathways to meet our carbon reduction targets. I think we also have to we shouldn't be confining our research to the mitigation sides of climate change. We should also be doing more work on how we adapt our transport system to climate change, and also think of what happens if we overshoot our current carbon targets and budgets and have to devote more of our time and effort into negative emissions, having to remove emissions already in the atmosphere. What will be the implications of that for transport and logistics? And of course, all of this has to be seen from a public policy perspective, because it seems to me that the public policymakers, as yet, are a bit uncertain as to how to optimize the mix of instruments and policy initiatives that will deliver a rapid and cost-effective reduction in our emissions. And moving finally to my fourth category, my fourth theme, which relates to the scoping of the research effort. I've been a researcher in transport and logistics now for over 40 years, and in that time I've detected a tendency for researchers to draw too tight a boundary around their studies, too tight a sectoral, geographical, disciplinary boundary, and to overlook a lot of the fundamental interconnections between transport and other parts of the economy and society. So I think we've got to extend that scope. I think what we should also guard against too is over-relying on technology and energy switches to try to decarbonize the transport sector. In other words, relying perhaps too heavily on the engineering solutions. I say this as a social scientist myself, but it seems to me that we may be underestimating the social, the behavioral, the managerial changes that could be made, because they also can make a big contribution, it seems to me, to improving overall sustainability, but also to cut the carbon intensity of logistics operations. I think we should also be careful that we don't become preoccupied with climate change to the exclusion of the other negative externalities of transport. I'm talking here about air pollution, accidents, noise, vibration. As yet, we haven't completely solved those problems, and so I think we should be guard against diverting too much of our attention towards climate change and underestimating the work that's still to be done in addressing these other negative externalities. And then finally, I think we should also try to continue breaking down what I call research silos, not just between different disciplines, but also between the work being done on passenger and freight transport, between the work done on land, sea and air, between infrastructure and services, between academic and consultancy-based research. It seems to me that in our clean transport agenda, we really need work which is more holistic, more inclusive, more mutually respectful of differing perspectives. And my hope is that in the research that's now going to be done as part of Horizon Europe in transport, I hope it fulfills these various requirements. I'm sorry that was a bit rushed, but hopefully you've appreciated some of the messages I've been trying to convey. Thank you very much.
No, Alan, you've set the scene extremely well, and I've covered a lot of ground. And I'd like to immediately pick up on your third theme, which is the sort of policy dilemmas and the sort of implicit challenge that you set for policymakers to come to Harold. So, Harold, what do you think the framework conditions should be to make the change we need towards sustainable, resilient transport systems? And are we as policymakers doing enough?
Thank you, Patrick, for your question, and it's great to be here also live with you in the studio, at the same time connecting to so many people outside digitally. Indeed, as Alan indicated, this will be really a matter of urgency, because the shift that we are confronted with in the terms of the Green Deal will be a real paradigm shift. And this is not something that is going to be incremental. We really have to step up our ambitions. And we'll do that, of course, first of all, through a new strategy that will be put forward by the end of the year by Commissioner Vălean. And that will highlight something that perhaps people do not expect, that this shift will come for each of the modes of transport individually, and cannot be done through anything like a modal shift or any other way we tried to do in the past. This will be really a change that is needed deeply. And for that, and people will ask, how will you realize such a thing that you have not been able to do over the past 20 or 30 years? For that, we will put forward a real package of measures. There will be, of course, a lot of change in legislations that are already there, like the CO2 legislation, which we expect to be modified possibly in the summer of 2021. The Alternative Fuel Infrastructure Directive or the TEN-T legislations to make sure that there are alternative fuels available for all the different transport modes. But also beyond that, we have to look at all the different components that are available to us, like the ETS legislation, or also the availability of infrastructures, or beyond that also the air pollution emission standards. So it's a full package, Patrick, that we need to deploy. And finally, to also put that from philosophy through package to the last point that Alan was making as well. This is a shift that will keep us busy from 2020 to 2030, but also possibly to 2040 and 50. So it has to be robust, it has to be based upon a lot of facts. And there I will come, of course, closer to what we are discussing here today, to the research that is underlying. And that has to be taken into account in this cross multidisciplinary approach, not only focusing on the Green Deal alone, but also on all the other externalities that we have not yet incorporated fully, whether it's road safety, for instance, whether it is also congestion, or whether these other elements that Alan put forward so rightly, that have to be a comprehensive transport approach. So from philosophy and strategy, through package of measures that will be very comprehensive, through research that will back this up. And I hope very much, Patrick, that this can be seeing the light very, very soon, and your R&I days kick in rightly so. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Harold. I move straight now to Grazia, who from Airbus, a leading actor and a strong voice in the debate on making the contribution of mobility to climate change and the post-coronavirus challenges. So how will aviation emerge from the pandemic with climate neutrality as a core long-term competitiveness factor? Grazia.
Yes, thank you very much, Patrick. This is indeed a very pertinent, timely, and thought-provoking question. As you can imagine, the aviation industry has been literally gutted by the crisis. Worldwide domestic flights have been down 70% for months on end. And here in Europe, we see the largest regional airports managing up to 90% fewer flights. And incidentally, you know, the ripple effect created by this slump in air traffic is severely impacting the global economy. The aviation industry, our contribution to the worldwide GDP alone is a staggering $2.7 American dollars, $1 trillion of American dollars. So just to say, you can understand why we at Airbus have been laser focused on supporting our entire aviation ecosystem to basically just make sure that our industry stays afloat. And yes, this has begged us, this has begged of us an evident question: is aviation still committed to climate action in a post-pandemic world? Or will the focus be rather on getting profitable again and recovering from the gravest crisis that ever hit our industry? I'll be very candid. When you ask how can we possibly emerge from the pandemic with climate neutrality as a core long-term competitiveness factor, well, the answer is pretty straightforward. How can we not? Already well before the crisis, it had become widely accepted that preserving our climate and environment is the indispensable foundation upon which to build the future of aviation. And this both economically and ecologically, both societally and politically. And while the crisis has only dialed up the urgency for a healthy environment, I firmly believe that there won't be any industry profit without climate protection. And at Airbus, we are not only sticking to our guns when it comes to flying carbon neutral in the decades to come, but we've even accelerated our ambition into a tangible plan to bring to market a zero-emission aircraft, the first zero-emission aircraft, by 2035. And indeed, for our industry, there is no silver bullet solution to decarbonizing the skies. We need multiple technology pathways. We need to continue pushing forward with the production and uptake of sustainable aviation fuels. We need to leverage continuously upon the learnings from our exploration of electric flight. But one particular technology we've been exploring and find extremely promising is indeed hydrogen. And just on Monday, we revealed 3 concepts representing 3 different approaches to achieving the zero-emission flight target by 2035, exploring various technology pathways and aerodynamic configurations, basically. And all 3 concepts rely on hydrogen as a primary power source. I believe there's slides to show the 3 concepts possibly. We estimate that through these solutions, hydrogen could contribute by more than 50% to our journey towards climate neutrality, allowing literally mobility to continue serving that fundamental human need to connect, create societal bonds, and drive economical progress in a way that is possibly more in harmony with the environment, so that future generations can enjoy flying just as much as we do.
Thanks very much, Grâce, and thanks for that really strong commitment on behalf of an industry which, as we know, is indeed really at the center of the economic turmoil of the COVID crisis, and hearing your commitment to the Green Deal objectives and decarbonisation is extremely fundamental. So I'm now going to sort of pass over the challenge to Thierry to talk about the road transport sector, and in particular truck and bus, and from the perspective of Volvo. Is the commitment of the road transport sector as strong as we've just heard from aviation? And what does it mean for your competitiveness?
Thank you, Patrick. And I hear a lot of consistency, to be frank, both in the preparation of this nice day and in what I just heard from all of you. Well, to be simple, the global warming is the challenge. We have no choice. We need to fix it here and now. And back to the question you raised about the COVID-19 and the consequences, we already see that trends that we used to see before, in the pre-COVID phase, regarding, I would say, things that are impacting the logistic flows and all that, are accelerating. And we are all citizens. We are all dealing with this COVID phase, which is a challenge, and we are changing our habits as citizens, as individuals. We are going less and less to stores. We trend to buy online, to buy from home, because it's more safe. It's a way to be in a good shape. It's a wide span of choices. So that was already the case before COVID, obviously. But we see an accelerating trend on this online buying, and just this part of the buying behavior is changing a lot. And it's just an example. It's changing a lot the setup in terms of logistic flows. And if we go to from the final customer to the manufacturing facilities, this logistic flow will continue to evolve over years. But we see clearly that starting from the last mile deliveries, the overall logistic flow will continue to evolve. And that means that we need to prepare new solutions that will answer to those needs. The other point, which is obviously very crucial, is the fact that we are in the fourth revolution, the energy revolution. And I was hearing Grazia speaking about hydrogen, and our view is very similar in the Volvo Group. Electricity and hydrogen are the energy of the future. The energies of the future. It's very important for us. It's very crucial. We are pushing very much on that. I will come to that. We are developing vehicles, both buses and trucks. We are starting to sell vehicles already on the market in different countries. And this energy transition is very crucial. Another aspect, which is to be further developed, is the green aspect of those energies in terms of energy as such. That means we need to ensure that the electricity that is provided is green. And even more, we know that right now the hydrogen is not yet green, and we have a big challenge to make it green. So that's a major challenge for the next few years, and we are handling that with partnerships and the right approach to get that done. But we need support and we need to team up on that. And that was my next point. The key point into that question of energy transition and climate change is a matter of teaming up and ensuring that as a total, this challenge for Europe is taking at the right level and at the right speed. We need to team up. It's a matter of European leadership within the world, and we are very, very convinced that that's the future of Europe, to take this challenge at the right level and at the right speed. The other aspect of that is that it's not a question of Europe, it's not a question of states, it's not a question of cities, it's not a question of industry, it's not a question of citizen, it's the question of everybody. We need to bring everybody, because that will change a lot the way all I would say this chain will work together to make those solutions affordable, because affordability is a very important point. If we want to succeed, and we want to succeed, we need to ensure that at the end, within few years, the beginning will be a bit challenging on the affordability. We know that because the maturity of those solutions is not the same as the one we have practiced for 100 years. It's another era in which we are now. And we need to ensure that the affordability of those solutions is worked together, supported together, and that we go full speed. We are very, very committed in the Volvo Group to make the transformation happen. We have refocused our research and innovation efforts post-COVID on this transformation. So that means that it's already our star in the sky, and we are moving forward full speed on that.
Great to hear. So thanks very much for that. I'm somewhat failing in my duties as a moderator in keeping us all to time, starting, I think, with speaking myself too long at the beginning. But so I'm going to move straight on to our second round of questions, where we're going to get into a little bit more what we expect from research and innovation policies to contribute to our collective ambition that we've heard so clearly expressed already. And I'd like to start with Alan, bringing together the first and the fourth point of his presentation. So firstly, the sense of urgency, and secondly, the need for a broad and comprehensive scope in our research and innovation agenda. But ask if you could sort of drill down, given this urgency, what would be the most burning expectations that you see in terms of research and innovation, and when would we expect this to come to the table?
Yeah, good question. I mean, one could sort of cherry pick areas of research that need urgent attention. I still think that there's a significant amount of low-hanging fruit to be harvested. Initiatives in transport which will be relatively cheap, easy to apply, and yet will yield a significant carbon benefit. I obviously can speak mainly about my own field of freight transport, where I'm an advocate, for example, of longer and heavier trucks, which would require a regulatory change, but obviously supporting an energy shift towards electrification and hydrogen, as we've heard from the two previous speakers, would clearly help. I think it's also important to see this from a policy perspective as well. I feel that the research shouldn't just be prospective and forward-looking. It should also look at the impact of previous policy instruments and initiatives to learn lessons, because I think we're all in a sort of learning process at the moment, trying to find the most effective and quickest ways of decarbonising transport. I think also, in addition to focusing on the things that can be delivered quickly, we should promote blue skies, curiosity-driven research, because I'm always reminded of a statement by Lord Nicholas Stern, one of the climate change gurus, who said a few years ago that we're perhaps on the eve of a new low-carbon industrial revolution, a new era of creativity when we find new ways of doing things. And I hope very much that sentiment is infused in the transport world as well, because the results of that research, it seems to me, and this is probably addressing some of what we call the high-hanging fruit, the stuff that's going to take longer to mature, but in the longer term could be real game changers for the transport sector. I think that could also help to change the policy agenda that we've heard discussed as well. And I think we should be careful not to make mistakes, as I think we have done in the past. I think rather prematurely we saw biofuels, for example, as the solution to the problem. And then once the full life cycle analysis were done, we discovered that wasn't the right way to proceed. So we should proceed cautiously, but I think we should be open to fairly radical ways in which we can decarbonize our transport sector.
Okay. Thanks very much. I now want to move to Thierry and sort of get a bit more into the detail of the challenges and the market failures in the heavy road transport sector, one of the hard to abate sectors that Alan mentioned, to see what you think the most burning need for research and innovation to address these market failures in your sector. And perhaps you could also touch on the question we just had on the screen from the audience about whether you see a place for batteries in the decarbonisation of transport, particularly when we're talking about heavy road transport. Thierry, please.
Absolutely. Good. I will come to that. Well, obviously, research and innovation is very crucial in this phase of transformation. I was mentioning a few minutes ago that we are in a new revolution, like the revolution that has been for transportation 100 years ago, basically. We need to reinvent new solutions as the old solution has been invented between 1900 and 1920. That's the same, roughly the same period. And basically, we need to focus this research and innovation activities on new energies. I mentioned that a few minutes ago. That means that everything that will serve, I would say, electricity-driven vehicles and hydrogen-driven vehicles is what we need to do. And behind that, obviously, batteries are a crucial piece of this development as I would say, a provider of energies within the total picture. We see in the same landscape, we see obviously hydrogen, fuel cell development is very, very crucial. And behind that, that's for mobility solution. But behind that, and I should just reinforce the fact that the green electricity and the green hydrogen are fields in which we need to develop, as we need to develop, I would say, charging infrastructure and networks, delivery networks. And that is a big change. We will see that what we are practicing every day with our cars will change drastically over the next years because it will be new energies. Okay. There is another big battle that I would like to mention this morning is also the question of data management. Data management is an enabler, a big enabler of logistic flow transformation. We know that the digitalization is in process.
Thierry, we seem to have lost your connection. But I think the point you were making on data is, of course, very important, and maybe we'll have a chance to come back to it in a moment. But I'd like to move straight to Grazia for my next question, which, I mean, as you said, I'm not sure we can talk about market failure in the aviation sector in the present context, a sort of market revolution. But I just wonder whether, as we're working together in preparing under Horizon Europe a future clean aviation partnership with you and other key industry stakeholders, what are the research and innovation priorities that you hope to see coming out of this future partnership with industry?
Yes, thank you very much, Patrick. EU funding strategies have been, are, and will be of critical importance for Airbus. After all, we don't forget that our industry does depend on the political agendas set by the EU member states and the European institutions, especially when it comes to innovation capacity. To be clear, we are absolutely persuaded that aviation is an irreplaceable force to connect people, to connect cultures for good across the planet in a way which, again, needs to be in harmony with the environment. And it will continue being so also in the so-called new normal of a world which needs to cohabit with the virus and its repercussions, at least for a long time to come. So we're going to have to really leverage all the innovation capacity we can to fulfill the bold commitments to decarbonize air travel. But we cannot do it on our own. We cannot do it without a multilateral approach together with our European partners. And to this extent, it is really crucial for the EU to maintain the funding levels and the conditions for the whole aerospace sector, for all aerospace sector related research in particular and partnerships, which will help us further climate action. And in particular, indeed, the Clean Aviation Partnership, successor to Clean Sky 2. For us, this is really, it's a European R&T flagship, symbolizing European competitiveness and literally paving the way to new generations of zero-emission aircraft on shorter term via sustainable aviation fuel, for instance, on longer term, on hydrogen technologies and infrastructure. And let's not forget also the integrated air traffic management partnership, so the successor of César, right? This will be another key program for Airbus and for the whole air traffic management community. We really see this as the right framework for Europe to remain competitive and to develop advanced technologies for greener traffic operations, sustainable aviation growth, and bringing really ATM finally into the digital age. And importantly, we really believe that the budget currently allocated to the next EU Research and Innovation Framework program, and that is Horizon Europe, could stand to be much more ambitious. And this said, well, the proposals of the European Commission and the EU member states to allocate at least part of the next generation EU recovery fund to research are definitely very highly welcome.
Okay, thanks, Garcia. And certainly we will be eager to continue working closely with you to ensure that whatever money we finally get from these difficult budget discussions, that we will make it have the most impact we can in research and innovation. Thierry, we lost you for a minute, and you were sharing some thoughts on the importance of data and data management in this whole discussion. I can give you 30 seconds to finish your thoughts on that before I ask the last question for Harald. So Thierry, if you want to come back.
Yeah, absolutely. No, data management is absolutely crucial because it's a logistic enabler as a total. It will connect everybody into this new world, and that's why I really think that we need to push and further develop the efforts that we have regarding data management as a complementary to energy, new energies. That's what I would like to say.
Okay, thanks very much. So, thanks for all of your thoughts and comments. So, Harald, what do you make of all of that? What's your conclusion from this discussion on what research and innovation measures we need in the European Union to ensure a more resilient and climate-friendly transport system? And perhaps I could abuse your knowledge of the sector also to throw to you the question we got on the screen here about Hyperloop technologies as a possible interesting option to decarbonize intercity mobility, and whether you see that as a possible dimension in the future EU research and innovation landscape.
Thank you, Patrick. And first of all, allow me to compliment also RNI and all your colleagues for this new setup of the Horizon Europe program, because it allows indeed, I think, in the way that you have been co-creating this so far, to combine between the high-hanging fruits that Alan was mentioning on the one hand within the pillar one, with the more lower-hanging fruits in the second pillar, which is policy-oriented, and then, of course, also what is more close to market in the third pillar. What is important, I think, Patrick, in here is, and it was said also by I think, Alain, is also the synergies between the different components of research. What we have been observing too often in the past is that there was some work in isolation. And if I look at what was also said by Gracia and by Thierry, the combination of what is done, for instance, in one specific joint undertaking is not, I would think, bringing the full benefits of that if it is not combined with all the other elements coming from other sources. So if we have work done in the Clean Sky, it should be paired to some extent with synergies coming from, for instance, the fuel cell and hydrogen one. And this synergies is exactly, I think, Patrick, what you are doing right now in the setting up of the program. And so therefore we are very much in favor of it. We are pushing it together with you. It cannot be this incremental change that I was saying in the beginning, this real step change that we need in transport cannot come if we do not look at the complementarity and the total picture that needs to be brought about. And there is a second dimension to that. And that's why I'm so grateful also for the way that R&I is handling this. It also needs to be complemented with the other tools and policies and instruments that we have available. It cannot be that Horizon Europe pushes it alone. We also need to back this up with, for instance, the Connecting Europe facility, with InvestEU, with the RRF program, because in isolation, if we do not see the links between the research on making things happening from high or low hanging through the data collection until the deployment, then there is not the stability that I sketched in my first reply. We need to have a view on what will be happening between now 2020 to 2030 to 2050. So stability on research and full-fledged way that this research can come into deployment. And that second type of synergy between the programs is what was missing also very much in the past. So I really like and love to see this way of working and co-creating, taking it all the way through the innovation, through the discovery, through the data collection, and then into the deployment. And these things are sometimes very close to each other. For instance, certain parts on hydrogen can be already close to market, and we could do them, for instance, together with InvestEU or with RRF. And others are further away from the market, are still high-hanging fruits, and we need to do them in research first and then deploy. But compliments, Patrick, and back to you. And on Hyperloop, I didn't reply to the question immediately. I think Hyperloop is a high-hanging fruit because I really believe that we have a lot of other things to do first before we embark on such a new technology. So that is good, and we'll work on it in Pillar 1, I think.
Okay, well, look, thanks very much, Harold, and also for leaping in on that question, which I think gave us an additional insight. We have perhaps one final question for Alain, which I'm going to ask you to answer very, very quickly. I mean, you talked about the importance of research into behavior and the social impact. Could you say a few more words about the dimensions of that, whether it's consumers, organizations, or markets?
I think it would be all three. If we look at the behavior of consumers, it seems to me one of the real mega trends here is the move to online retailing, which has been given a huge boost, obviously, by the COVID crisis. From a transport research standpoint, that impacts both on personal travel and on freight movements as well. It's going to have a huge impact on city logistics. So we really have to get into the minds of the consumers to see how their desires for order fulfillment in the future is going to change, because that's going to have a huge impact on transport flows and also on related carbon intensity. But also in the business world as well, I think one of the good news stories is we've seen much greater engagement from corporations to decarbonize their operations. And if them are now committing to net zero targets for their entire businesses over the next 10, 20 years, and of course, that impacts on their transport demands, both for business travel and also for logistics and supply chains. So perhaps I'm biased because I'm a social scientist and I'm more interested in the behavioral aspects, but I think that's a very fertile area for future research in this area.
No, well, I'm very happy we had an opportunity to come back to that point, because it was something you highlighted also in your opening remarks, and I think it is very important. So look, I mean, I think it only remains for me in the remaining minute or so that we have, firstly, to thank Alan, Gracia, Thierry, and Harold for your very rich and thought-provoking contributions to this discussion. What I take away is a really powerful shared commitment to continue to work together in the delivery of the objectives of the Green Deal as part of our work on the post-COVID recovery, the importance within that of a really strong and sustained research and innovation component, breaking silos, working in synergies with other programs, and covering the full agenda. So thanks to everyone for being part of this, and enjoy the participation in the rest of the European Research and Innovation Days. Thank you very much.